Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how tennis is popular in this country, but I'll use a tennis referee's call. Time. And permit me to open this panel session. First of all, I want to thank the organizers. It's a great honor and privilege to be invited to this forum, especially in such distinguished company. There are no such things as too much dialogue. And it is quite interesting, and there's a powerful symbolism that this forum is being held in Minsk, as we all know, a city that was razed to the ground in the Second World War. It's a powerful symbol and a powerful message that such things should never be repeated again. A journalist asked me just a few minutes ago, what do I think about new dialogues and new initiatives? And I've said if there's anything that history has taught us is that even the greatest of calamities always do end in that dialogue, even if it's for capitulation, but it's always better that war is avoided. Even bad solutions are better than wars, which is, as somebody said, an extended version of politics, arm of politics, and I would interject into that, it's the extended version of, or arm of failed politics. Today, the world is very, very interesting, as so is the subject that we will discuss. The first mention of a new world order, and I stand corrected in there if somebody knows better, was first mentioned in chronicles of Alexander the Great victories as he went on towards Asia. People tend to confuse the New World Order as a permanent state. It is permanent only in the fact that it keeps evolving and reflects the natural state of affairs at any given moment, situation, or place in the world. There are several paradoxes today that we face. The world, in many, many ways, has made over the last couple of decades tremendous advances in technology, science, in medicine, even business, industry. The entire world, knowledge of this world is at our fingertips. We're now reading authors from Afghanistan, from Sri Lanka, from Latin America, as easy as yesterday we read only what our local communities produce or big houses in Europe and the Americas. So we have this capacity to understand each other, and as we know, fear comes from the lack of knowledge of somebody else. Today we do not have that excuse. The butterfly effect, and now I'm just bullet pointing for the discussion. The butterfly effect, as we know, has never been so pronounced as today, because the world has literally become a global village. 100 years ago, what was happening in Korea couldn't have really affected what's happening in Belarus, for instance, or anywhere else that much. Today, it is all interactive, intervernable. We feel, one way or the other, everything that is happening across the globe. And before I cut this short, now it's funny that with all this communications capability at our fingertips, we seem to be communicating less. It appears that we don't have time to really rethink or think deeply certain decisions. But also, weirdly enough, old foes tend to regard each other with outdated optics. Couple that with a totally new phenomenon of social networks, a new kind of pressure on decision makers and policy makers, we come into a new situation that can't even compare to like 20 years ago, let alone 2 centuries ago. And this is why every dialogue, every conference is fresh blood, it needs fresh ideas. Big systems like the United Nations, the Helsinki process, they played a huge role and still are playing. But maybe they all need reforms, serious retweaking, including, for instance, European Union, which we have to admit is one of the cornerstones of mankind's achievement in the 20th century. It also has now turned out that it needs certain alternation. Alternations and tweaking are for the good and not for the bad, but they need, and it's a prerequisite, that they need brave, far-thinking leaders, advisors, stakeholders. So on that note, allow me to present the first speaker, and I will go as it's listed here, Mr. Erkki Tuomioja, Member of the Parliament of Finland, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland from 2000 to 2007 and 11 to 2015. Please.
Well, thank you. As I understand it, the world order means an order based on multilateral cooperation and respect for international law. But this, of course, describes rather my wishes than actual reality. But the alternatives to this are either anarchy or order imposed by the strongest in its own interest. And both of these alternatives are recipes for conflicts, war, and human suffering. For many centuries, anarchy was restrained by the Westphalian world order, by which I refer to the principles laid down in the Treaty of Westphalia. Okay, by which I refer to the principles laid down. Okay. Right. Well, the alternatives to a rules-based world order are anarchy or the rule of the strongest in its own interest. And these are recipes for war, conflict, and human suffering. But for many centuries, anarchy was restrained by the Westphalian world order, which was laid down in the Treaty of Westphalia, ending the 30 Years' War back in 1648. And it established the principle that sovereign actors, originally sovereign lead rulers rather than sovereign nation states, were the sole actors who counted or had the right to be counted. And while this order was never as determinant as it was made out to be, it became increasingly irrelevant and outdated already in the 20th century. And today the whole concept of absolute sovereignty has become a rather theoretical construction, as interdependence has inevitably eroded its foundation. And one reason for this is the growth of the world's population, which has irrevocably changed the world. And is the most obvious reason why interdependence, whether we like it or not, in both things good and bad, is a reality that no one can escape. And this applies to all countries, big or small, with or without nuclear weapons, irrespective of whether they embrace globalization or would want to opt out of it. And the second reason is the relatively recent recognition of how the way we have used natural resources and treated our environment has been unsustainable. Climate change and the rapidly proceeding loss of biodiversity are the most important indicators of this. And mankind today has, at best, only a few decades in which to change our ways so that they fulfill the requirements of sustainability. And this is not only a challenge to ecological, but also social and economic sustainability. And it has direct implications for hard security as well. That the use of force has made a comeback as, if not always an acceptable way, then at least an accepted way of conducting international relations is of course appalling and dangerous. It can lead to escalations of ongoing conflicts, but it is also worrying in it that it directs our attention and efforts away from dealing with those threats to our world and the future of mankind, which can only be dealt with in the broadest possible multilateral cooperation. And for this reason, I don't think that there can be a separate security for Eastern Europe or for any other region in the world. And certainly not one determined by who happens to be your biggest neighbor. So, this said, we have to acknowledge that there are still countries with leaders that do not recognize or care about this, but seek to, out of either ignorance or short-term ambitions, to act with disregard to the rules of the international order and also use military power at their disposal. And many would identify Russia as a country which has done so. But also Western countries, including the US, Turkey, and many others, have also done it. And this is not only about traditional power politics with military means. The way the US administration has resorted to unilateral trade protection measures is equally disruptive for the international order. The EU seems to be the international actor most keen on upholding and strengthening this rules-based world order, even if some of its own member states are not always respecting it either. Obviously, not everyone is unhappy about the erosion of sovereignty, and I see this also in Eastern Europe, where notions of absolute national sovereignty continue to be influential. But I see no alternative to accepting the pooling of our sovereignties in an international rules-based world order if we want to continue living in an interdependent world. And what do we need to uphold and strengthen this order and deliver answers to the challenges facing us? Rather than creating, again, new fora or institutions, I think we need to make full use of our existing organizations, respecting their founding principles to which we are all committed, such as the UN, the OSCE, Council of Europe, and so on. But this is not to say that they are perfect, and we should always be open to reforming them to increase their legitimacy and efficiency, and this should start obviously with the Security Council of the UN. And what about the OSCE? I would remind us all that the UN or the OSCE are no better or worse than the commitment to their principles of their member states. But when there is a minimum of agreement and commitment, then they can give significant value added to solving the issues which we are facing. And this applies also to the OSCE. And it's interesting that the OSCE and the Helsinki process behind it are regarded in other parts of the world, in Asia, in the Middle East, as examples which they would like to see also implemented in their regions. Thank you.
It does remind me of the adage that there's no such thing as a small country, but small influence. And we all need to find ways and means how to connect the countries with a lower economic or military base into a security and development and cooperation structure. But of course, that always has sort of a threat hanging over it where the big powers would like such consolidation of affairs. I come from a region which is the best example of what it means when you have a vortex of various interests over pulling the region apart and drawing into their own. In Bosnia, I think we counted last time about 8 active, seriously active influences fighting, and they're totally divergent. So we'll leave that for the later questions. I call on Alexandr Gesсель, Director of Political Affairs, Council of All Europe. I hope I didn't mispronounce your surname, sir. It needs to be switched off.
Yes, I've had the impression that I understood how it was functioning. Basically, it's not, which also explains how sometimes we have difficulties without nothing. No, my name is Gessel, but that is not, the major problem. Дорогие друзья, здравствуйте. Во-первых, мне очень приятно быть на этом форуме и представлять здесь Совет Европы. Конечно, поначалу можно задать себе вопрос, какое отношение, в принципе, имеет Совет Европы к вопросам обороны, безопасности. К вопросам обороны никакого. Потому что отцы-основатели Совета Европы в далеком 1949 году решили, что Совет Европы должен заниматься всем, чем он только может, кроме вопросов обороны. Для этого были созданы другие структуры, и мы стараемся этим не заниматься. Хотя в современном взаимозависимом мире это не так просто. Эта сессия посвящена вопросам изменения мирового порядка и его следствиями для Европы, Восточной Европы. Поэтому изначально я юрист, я решил подумать прежде всего о том, что такое сегодня мировой порядок, что такое изменение, и дальше, а что такое Восточная Европа? Потому что мы очень просто употребляем различные понятия, нам кажется, что они очевидны. А когда начинаешь думать, то размышлять, то вот очевидные вещи становятся гораздо менее очевидными. Совет Европы – это прежде всего юридическая организация, в меньшей степени политическая, поэтому мы всегда смотрим на все, даже на политические вопросы, стараемся смотреть с юридической точки зрения. Так вот, сегодня уже цитировали и поговорки, и различные мудрые изречения. Я вспомнил в этой связи, я не уверен, что я помню на 100%, но когда-то, когда я учил философию, я помню высказывание Гераклита о том, что единственная неизменная константа – это изменения. Поэтому изменения, они естественны, очевидны, и мир и миропорядок сегодня меняются с очень большой скоростью, в том числе и наш европейский миропорядок. И говоря об важных изменениях, вообще мы всегда думали, что изменения, они должны все время быть к лучшему. К сожалению, все, что мы наблюдаем сегодня, доказывает, что далеко не все изменения ведут к лучшему. Мы сегодня видим все-таки большой откат по многим параметрам, по вопросам безопасности, по вопросам обеспечения прав, в том числе и прав человека, по гарантиям прав и свобод. Конечно, в целом в мире, но даже и на европейском континенте. И вот я бы хотел предложить несколько элементов, составляющих миропорядка, которые, на мой взгляд, сегодня являются очень проблематичными, где есть проблемы, где есть, в общем-то, изменение уровня в меньшую сторону. Прежде всего, это вопросы безопасности, а правильнее сказать, небезопасности. Мне кажется, что начиная с падения Берлинской стены, всем было очевидно, что у нас стало больше безопасности. Были вопросы, которые больше не приходили в голову. Я вот часто беседую с различными соседями моими, с людьми, которых я встречаю, с таксистами. Таксисты — это вообще очень важный элемент народной мудрости. Всегда вот можно узнать от таксиста, что в том или ином городе люди думают. И люди стали в последнее время говорить, что мы боимся, что вот долгое время нам казалось, что все идет в правильную сторону, а сегодня люди стали бояться войны в Европе. И как сказал господин министр, сегодня совсем недалеко от нас идут военные действия. Это, безусловно, огромный откат назад. Это большая проблема в сегодняшнем состоянии миропорядка. Второй момент, который мне кажется очень опасным, это отход от мультикультурализма. И от мультилатерализма тоже. Они очень часто идут вместе. Мы сначала отрицаем наличие и приверженность различным культурам, а потом мы считаем, что и в принципе на уровне международного сообщества обсуждать в мультилатеральном формате не так важно. Важно свои собственные интересы. И в последнее время мы видели, как те или иные нации, те или иные страны отдавали предпочтение своим, как они считают на сегодняшний день, интересам, вне зависимости от интересов общественных и коллективных. Конечно, Брексит – это первое, что приходит на ум. Британский народ проголосовал за выход из Европейского Союза. Он считает на сегодняшний день, что так будет лучше. Будет ли лучше? Ну, я лично глубоко сомневаюсь. Но вот это откат от мультилатерализма. Я даже бы сказал, что это, конечно, не совсем европейская тематика, но выход Соединенных Штатов из иранских соглашений тоже являются такой политикой. Это не прибавляет безопасности, на мой взгляд. Устоявшаяся система сдержек и противовесов дает сбои. Есть вещи, которые казались абсолютно незыблемыми в последнее время. И мы видим, тем не менее, что вот популизм, который сегодня все больше и больше присутствует, он используется для того, чтобы дать меньше места для демократического диалога, для оппозиции, для, в общем-то, основ демократии. И я бы сказал, что это происходит во многих странах, и в Восточной Европе, и в Западной Европе. Популизм, на мой взгляд, вещь очень опасная. Мы до конца еще не понимаем, куда это может привести. Но, в принципе, когда формируются правительства, я не буду называть, конечно, на принципах популизма, это только первый шаг. Вот какие будут следствия из этого, мы все увидим. Но для мирового порядка, на мой взгляд, это большая проблема. И, соответственно, возникает угроза устоявшимся институтам, в том числе и международным организациям. Появляется большая социальная разобщенность. Вот это очень интересный момент. Вы только что об этом упомянули. На наш взгляд, социальная разобщенность во времена, когда очень просто быть сконнектированным, очень просто общаться друг с другом, это характерный элемент сегодняшнего кризиса. Солидарность ослабляется, и в конце концов сегодня у нас в Европе есть еще один очень большой элемент риска – это серые зоны. Так называемые зоны конфликтов, замороженных конфликтов или незамороженных конфликтов. И все это, безусловно, воздействует на нас всех. Теперь я бы хотел сказать о следующем. Наш генеральный секретарь, господин Ягланд, он все время говорит одну норвежскую мудрость такую. Он говорит, что на самом деле самое важное для маленьких стран или для больших стран, для любых стран, иметь хороших соседей. Надо вкладывать в создание хороших соседей. Это и есть большой элемент безопасности. Мне кажется, что сегодня вот в таком милитаристском угаре, если можно сказать, мы об этом все больше и больше забываем. А все-таки диалог – это гораздо более важно и гораздо более продуктивно, чем отличные вооружения. Я ни о ком особенно не говорю в этом смысле. Мое время выходит, я хотел бы сказать только одно. Совет Европы, как я сказал, не был создан для вопросов обороны. Но мы, да, были созданы для вопросов безопасности. И базис, на котором существует Совет Европы, а именно права человека, демократия, верховенство закона, являются, на мой взгляд, сегодня основными элементами для обеспечения безопасности в любом регионе Европы. Поэтому Восточная Европа, на мой взгляд, мало чем отличается от всех других регионов. Эти базисные, базисные положения должны соблюдаться. И это приведет нас к хорошим результатам. И последнее. Восточная Европа, мы не можем ее так просто определить. Мы не знаем, кто в нее входит. Сегодня, находясь здесь, в Минске, а мы в Совете Европы мыслим о Европе от Лиссабона до Владивостока, мы совсем не на востоке, мы практически на западе, на крайнем западе этого огромного пространства. Но не вдаваясь в объяснение и в определение, что же является Восточной Европой, мне кажется, что самое главное для Восточной Европы не стать стеной, не стать местом для передовой, а стать мостом. Мостом между культурами, мостом между формами диалога, мостом для общения между нашими гражданами. Если мы это сможем сделать, тогда, может быть, мы потихонечку будем выходить из того кризиса, в котором мы сегодня глубоко увязли. Спасибо.
Thank you, Alexander. You have opened a lot of questions there. Very interesting especially for Q&A. Among others, whether democracy needs a lot of tweaking to cope with the new challenges. And of course, yeah, Ukraine could have been that bridge. Unfortunately, that opportunity was missed. I know exactly what you're talking about. But now let's see if we can find minds come up with a way to resolve this as soon as possible. Tomas Gрэм, Managing Director, Kissinger Associates from USA. Thomas, frankly, I don't know where to begin. I have so many questions for you, but I'll just let you go. No light means it's on.
Now it's on. Everybody has a lot of questions about the United States today. Thank you very much, Jovan. This is my first time in Minsk, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me here to participate in this important forum. Is it 1914 or 1938? That's the question we asked a decade ago when I was working on the U.S. National Security Council staff in the George W. Bush administration. Were we sleepwalking into a global catastrophe like the First World War because of our inability to imagine the consequences of our actions or our unwillingness to take the obvious off-ramps? Or were we not reacting resolutely enough to the challenge we saw emerging in and around Iraq, thereby inviting further and more violent terrorist attacks, and only postponing the day when we would have to engage in a life-or-death struggle from a less advantageous position? Would history judge our policy as one of far-sighted prudence or callous appeasement? Now, one can imagine that many officials in the foreign offices and chancelleries in Europe today are asking the same question. as the crises multiply and as tensions with Russia rise? Is it 1914 or is it 1938? The fact is that it wasn't 1914 or 1938 a decade ago, and it's not 1914 or 1938 today. But we are at a very important and major historical inflection point. We're not on the verge of a global catastrophe, but rather we're at a moment when the dimensions of change are outrunning our imagination. And if there is a recent historical analog, I would argue that it's the late 19th century. Then as now, the global balance of power was changing dramatically. Then a rising Germany was challenging the global leader, Great Britain, while the increasingly powerful United States was waiting in the wings. Now a rising China is challenging the United States as a global leader, and a newly inserted Russia is raising questions about the foundations of the global order. Then the technological marvels of the Industrial Revolution were changing radically the way we work and communicate in the first era of globalization. Now, information communications technology is once again revolutionizing the way we work and the way we communicate, and it's reinforcing the second great era of globalization. Then as now technological developments and social developments are recasting the fundamental relationship between state and society. Then what was called progress undermined the foundations of religious belief. Now what we call progress is raising questions about the adequacy of secularism to the challenges that we face. By the end of the 19th century, incredible energy had accumulated and held tremendous promise and laid the foundations for the expanding prosperity that we enjoy today. But at the same time, there was also the tremendous buildup of tension that unleashed the engines and fueled the ideologies of destruction that made the 20th century the most brutal and bloodiest in history. And in this light, the challenge that we face today is taking advantage of the tremendous opportunities while avoiding the orgies of destruction. And nowhere, I would argue, is this challenge greater than in Europe. The promise of Europe has suffered a loss of vitality and direction since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Fiscal crises, terrorism, immigration, populism, and yes, Brexit have all undermined the promise of Europe. And at the same time, we find that the leaders of Europe appear unable to summon up a vision of Europe that can rally their populations and restore their confidence. At the top of Europe's agenda is its future security architecture. And at the center of this question lie two countries, Russia and the United States. Russia, because of its recent actions in Ukraine and its meddling in the domestic affairs of many European states, have challenged the norms of European security that were laid out in Helsinki in 1975. The United States, because the rhetoric and the actions of President Trump have raised serious questions about his and my country's commitment to Europe. Now, we'll never be able to build a durable European security architecture unless Russia is included and the United States is engaged. So what do we do? What's to be done? The answer to engaging the United States, I think, is perhaps straightforward. And that is that Europe itself must get more serious about its own defense. That doesn't necessarily mean spending more money, but it does mean spending the money that you are spending more efficiently to enhance European capabilities and European resolve. It's simply a fact that the American public is not going to support NATO over the long term if it does not believe that Europe is making the sacrifices it needs to for its own defense. The answer to including Russia, I think, is more complicated. The core issue is this. Russia is essential to European security, and yet it adheres to a set of values that in many ways are alien to Europe's. This is not a new question. In fact, if you look back over the past 200 years, there's been a similar and recurring question with Russia. And so the question for us today is, how do we accommodate Russia while still maintaining European values? Now, I think the answer to this is in a broad-ranging dialogue. Perhaps the historic dialogue that French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken of. That dialogue in its first instance needs to focus on the principles of European security that were laid out in the Helsinki Accords. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, peaceful settlement of disputes, self-determination, non-intervention in internal affairs, respect for human rights. We all claim to accept these principles, but I think it's clear as you look around the world that we interpret them and we apply them in very different ways. There are various fora where we could have this discussion, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a large trilateral Russian, European, and American forum that deals with and tries to sort out the fundamental questions of European security. The task is going to be to modernize these principles of European security, to bring them up to date, to take into account the technological changes that are revolutionizing the way we operate, but also to take into account the changing geopolitics in Europe. And the other goal should be to work out a durable set of relations between the three pillars of European security: a more or less united Europe, the United States and Canada, and Russia. And we want to do this in a way, ideally, that doesn't base security on the formation of adversarial camps the way we did it during the Cold War, but one that rather takes into account and is adequate to the challenges of the globalized world today. That, I think, is what we need to focus on. That, I think, is the way forward. It's not going to be easy, but we can continue in the way we have up to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, there are so many questions and so many avenues of thought to follow after that. But there is one thing that strikes me. In recent history, we had a bipolar world order, we had a unipolar world order, and now it's back to multipolar world order. And that's why the next, our collocator is very important. You know, let me tell you how I was on the verge of making a very serious mistake just a couple of weeks ago. We were doing an analysis about the situation in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So we covered all the bases, and luckily, before I let it fly, I sent it to one of my advisors. I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Boss, this is great, only you forgot one little factor." I said, "Which factor?" "I've taken account everybody." He said, "Well, China." I said, "What on earth, China now in Macedonia? What are we talking about?" I said, "Yeah, the Greek ports in Greece, a fast railroad off to Hungary." And I said, "Oops, I was really ashamed." But actually, to have made such an blatant sort of neglected such a big elephant in the room, if you will, goes on to show how everything is interconnected. And now, when I said multipolar world, we also, apart from the usual suspects among superpowers and big powers, we have the emergence of China on the world scale as a major player in every respect, and also the BRICS countries. that have changed a lot right now on an industrial and economic and financial level, but it is a question of time when, unless there are changes in today's winds pressuring, of course, they will play a bigger role. Mr. Zhen, please. Sorry.
Спасибо. Спасибо, председатель. Уважаемые участники форума Минского диалога, хотел бы сначала поблагодарить организаторов за приглашение на такой хорошей конференции. Но моя презентация, наверное, не так тесно связана с темой нашего форума. Но я считаю, что экономическое сотрудничество и гуманитарные связи, и даже какое-то общее развитие, это тоже хорошая гарантия безопасности, стабильности. Поэтому здесь хотел бы вам представить, что такое китайская инициатива «Один пояс, один путь». И еще это почему имеет большое значение построение нового типа международных отношений. Но, как вам известно, это важная инициатива совместного построения экономического пояса, шелковый путь и морского шелкового пути 21 века выдвинул председателю КНР господин Си Цзиньпин в 2013 году. Это большой вклад дипломатии Китая для мирового развития не только экономического, гуманитарного, но и политического, даже безопасное. Она сочетает всестороннее открытость Китая с региональным сотрудничеством и становится хорошим символом построения нового типа международного отношения, которое наше руководство подчеркнуло как цели внешней политики Китая в новую эпоху на 17-м съезде Компартии Китая прошлого года. Но за 5 лет с момента выдвижения концепции уже более 100 государств и международные организации выразили поддержку данной программе «Один пояс, один путь» и стали принимать активное участие в строительстве такой много проектов, включая здесь тоже Республика Беларусь, Россия и другие страны. В важных резолюциях, принятых Генеральной Ассамблеей ООН и Советом Безопасности, содержится ссылка на него. Благодаря общим усилиям введения инициативы «Один пояс, один путь» воплощаться в жизни и приносит богатые плоды. Строительство пояса и путь предполагает не начало с чистого листа, а работу на основе соображения уже существующих стратегий и используется взаимодополняющих преимуществ. Например, подписали политическое заявление о содержании с ЕС в мае 2015 году, и Китай подписал договор о сотрудничестве с более чем 40 странами и международными организациями. За 5 лет непрерывное упрощение и устранение препятствий в торговле. Китай вместе с странами, участвующих в создании пояса и путь, всеми силами способствовали упрощению торговли и инвестиций, постоянно улучшая условия для предпринимательской деятельности. Только для Казахстана и других стран Центральной Азии время таможенного досмотра сельскохозяйственная продукция сократилась на 90%. За эти годы непрерывное расширение свободного передвижения капитала Китая и 16 стран Центральной и Восточной Европы учредили совместный финансовый холдинг в формате 16+1. Сформирована многоуровневая сеть финансового сотрудничества одного пояса и одного пути. Это 5 лет углубления связи между народами, руководствуясь духом Великого Шелкового пути, страны-участники инициативы «Пояса и путь» приложили усилия по созиданию интеллектуального шелкового пути и здорового шелкового пути, здесь также мирного шелкового пути, а также осуществили сотрудничество в области науки, образования, культуры, здравоохранения и неофициальных контактов. Эти контакты помогли создать прочную общественную и социальную основу для реализации инициативы «Пояса и путь». Сегодня Китай проводит внешнюю политику, так называемую дипломатию великой державы с китайской спецификой. Выработана многовекторная, многоуровневая и многомерная дипломатическая концепция, реализация которой создана для развития Китая благоприятные внешние условия, реализуется инициатива совместного строительства одного пояса и одного пути. По инициативе Китая создал Азиатский банк инфраструктурных инвестиций, учрежден фонд «Шелковый путь». В Пекине проведен первый форум по международному сотрудничеству на высшем уровне в рамках инициативы «Один пояс, один путь». В 2019 году будет второй такой форум. В Китае еще проходили некоторые важные саммиты и встречи международных механизмов, но как АТС, большой двадцатки, еще БРИКС, совещание по взаимодействию и мерам доверия в Азии. Скоро будет саммит ШОС в июне, в начале. На этих высокоуровневых встречах Китай с другими странами обменивают мнениями, ищут общие позиции и выражают собственные взгляды и предложения. Китайское руководство выступило с инициативой создания сообщества единой судьбы человечества. Содействовали преобразованию системы глобального управления. Китай внес новый весомый вклад в дело мира и развития планеты. Китай будет с неуклонной решимостью развиваться дружбу и сотрудничество со всеми странами, стимулируя формирование нового типа международных отношений, основанных на взаимном уважении, равенстве и справедливости, сотрудничестве и всеобщей выигрыше. В настоящее время мир переживает период непростой, сложный, как грандиозного развития крупных перемен и серьезные перестройки. Такая тенденция не изменяется, как развитие многополярности мира, экономическая глобализация, информализация общества и культурное разнообразие. Ускоренными темпами идей преобразования системы глобального управления и международного порядка все более честным становятся взаимосвязи между странами. Повышается уровень их взаимозависимости, соотношение сил на международной арене, уменьшается общая тенденция к мирному развитию, является необратимой. В то же время человечество находится перед лицом множества общих вызовов. Выражение нестабильности и неопределенности в мировой развитии. Недостаток трансферов для роста мировой экономики. Непрерывно увеличивающихся разниц между богатыми и бедными. Возникающие одна за другой острые региональные проблемы, продолжает нарастать терроризм, киберобезопасность, особо серьезные инфекционные заболевания, климатическое изменение и другие нетрадиционные угрозы безопасности. Мы считаем, что ни одна страна не может в одиночку справиться с разнообразными вызовами, стоящими перед человечеством. Ни одна страна не может вернуться обратно на закрытый, изолированный... Сейчас закончу. Инициатива строения сообщества единой судьбы человечества имеет общее высказывание, то есть царит долгосрочный мир, всеобщая безопасность, совместное производство, открытость и инклюзивность, но и конкретные варианты, как новый тип концепции сотрудничества, новый тип регионального механизма, как один пояс и один путь, так и Шанхайская организация сотрудничества. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you. So my job is pretty ungrateful in that respect. Yes, the Chinese way, and I believe that will be very focused on China for the next decades to come. There's a lot that we still don't understand about the country. And one thing is for sure, that it is already playing a major role on the world stage and will have a massive impact. Not to say the least is how Europe is going to adjust its standards of doing business as subsidiary and everything with the emergence, the appearance of the Chinese products on it, and how a lot of very interesting situations are going to be resolved. We have with us today a veteran of the European Affairs, Hannes Swoboda, Director of International Institute for Peace, former member of the European Parliament from Austria. Hannes, what do you think? How it's going to look?
Should work, yes. The question on this inaugural plenary is, what does the changing world order hold for Eastern Europe? Well, the first answer is Eastern Europe today is not the same what Eastern Europe has been some years ago, 20 years ago, let's say. So the conflict line moved to the east. Maybe in the north, where Erkki is coming from, it's still the same conflict line, or whatever line you will call it. But if you go south, it moved to the east because the European Union and NATO moved itself to the east. Now, I was always, in my 18 years in European Parliament, an advocate of the accession process. But of course, if you see it from outside, it is not surprising that the extension of European Union, and especially, of course, extension of NATO, had to create some conflict at some time, and of course, at a different line, more to the east. So it is more or less obvious that a new conflict has been arising, and that is especially, of course, in the Black Sea area. Not by chance, it came out of the Ukraine developments and Ukraine changes. It could have been avoided under two conditions. The first one, the European Union, or the West, let's say the West and Russia, would have the same approach to international and even national politics. But this was not the case. The other alternative would have been if after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, one would have said, okay, let's sit together and let's build this common European house Gorbachev was speaking of. But that was not done. It was done according to the principle, the winner takes it all, as long as it is possible. But then it stopped more or less with Ukraine, and even before that, already in Georgia and Moldova. So, yes, there is a new conflict line. There are new conflicts, and not by chance it is in an area which is especially important for Russia, which is the area of the Black Sea. And in connection to the Black Sea, of course, you have to see even the Mediterranean. So not by chance Russia went into the void left or created in Syria, so that we have two areas or two sea areas which are closely connected and are, of course, influencing all what is happening in Eastern Europe. For example, think about the refugees. Refugees or migration has been mentioned by our American colleague. Even if some countries in Eastern Europe, inside European Union, reject to take up refugees or to take refugees into their country, it creates new conflicts. For example, inside European Union. So I think it should be very clear. It's not only, of course, Mr. Trump and others who make real problems. It's in this continent where Eurasian continent you can call, where it is much more fluid than it was before. There are not these fixed borders. And of course we see also Russia influencing areas like Eastern Europe. The Balkan can also be mentioned because they want to safeguard some sort of an influence and not accept new dividing lines much more eastern and much more closer to Russia. This is not about justification or legalization of what happened, but it's just to explain that we have to see what happened. Because if we see Russia's policy now, and I say from a Western European or Austrian perspective, it is a reaction to what has happening about 20 years after the breakdown of the Soviet Union. So, third point, China. Well, China has been just promoted also the One Belt, One Road initiative, which is, I think, a very clever initiative. An initiative which helps a lot of China and helps a lot of many countries. But still, we don't have common rules. For example, what about the debt burden of some of the countries? Because China is not just giving money, it's lending money and wants the money back. Will this country then come to the European Union or other international institutions if they can't pay back the money? Or what about, is the infrastructure built really in accordance with the infrastructure plans of European Union? These are open questions. I don't say no, I don't say yes, but I see that the European Union did not really act and find common rules with China on this kind the One Belt, One Road initiative implemented on European soil. And of course, countries like, if it's Macedonia, where also the highway is built by China, if you see the relationship in the size between a country like Macedonia or Hungary or whatever country you take in relation to China, you can imagine that, of course, the power of negotiation is quite different between China on the one hand and countries like Macedonia on the other hand. So it's not against that initiative. No, on the contrary, I think it's a very clever initiative. But what it shows that connectivity, and I did organize in the framework of the Austrian OSCE presidency, and some colleagues are here, seminars on connectivity, can bring very positive results, but also new conflicts. Because if China is active in our countries as a strong investor, yes, it has positive effects on employment, on economic growth, but of course can have also conflicts. So the last point. I think what we need is, of course, to define rules for those areas where we don't have yet really accepted rules. Erkki said already we need to work with institutions we have. And I think it is not worthwhile to start with new institutions, but maybe they should work differently or better. And let me just mention two elements of it. First of all, we have two economic collective organizations on the Eurasian continent. Integration organization, the European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union. Why don't they talk with each other more than just on a very low technical level? It's absolutely nonsense, absolutely not comprehensible that these two organizations, it's more a mistake of the European Union, so my side, so to say, that they don't talk. Let's find common rules how we can act to promote our economic activities and not split the continent again, even only on the economic field. And the second element, of course, is this idea about Helsinki 2. Of course, you cannot copy Helsinki. And Helsinki 2 maybe happen not only in Helsinki, but maybe in Vienna or maybe in Minsk. But what is really important is to think, what are the issues today? The issues are different than at that time. As I said, the borderline or the confront line is different. Helsinki 2 would deal much more with the question of the Black Sea area. Helsinki 2 would even integrate the issues of migration. Already now in the OEC, migration was a subject, but migration is a much bigger subject in the future for us, all of us. If we take refugees, if we don't take refugees, or whatever can move around, the question is how to differentiate between refugees and other migrants, how to deal with a small part of migrants or even of non-migrants who are terrorists. These are all issues we have to deal together, including, of course, the question of Syria. The only real strong actor in the region in Syria who could speak with all the partners, from Turkey to Saudi Arabia, is Russia today. The only one who will pay for the reconstruction of Syria is probably the European Union, or the biggest payer. So why not talk about the future of Syria from the political side, but also from the economic side? So these are the issues. And the final issue, of course, and the major general issue is how to combine the right of every country to choose its allies with geopolitical interests. You cannot deny any country to say you cannot even acquire to be a member, for example, of European Union or of NATO. On the other hand, of course, you have to respect that there are geopolitical interests. I always say the Monroe Doctrine in the US is well accepted. It would be a similar doctrine on the other side will not be accepted. Of course, it's not the same, but in some way it's similar. So I think we should really speak about rules, how to accept that the country can decide whomever it wants to join, and on the other hand, how you can preserve the geopolitical security interests of other countries who are not on the accession level. So I think there's a lot to do, wood to do beyond on Helsinki 2, not to think about the final status, but to start a process where different countries should talk with us seriously who are not talking today. Yes, Merkel has been with Putin and Macron will visit Putin, but we need a more steady process, and maybe Minsk could be also a good place to have that process going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannes. I really don't think there's a better place than Minsk for this. You mentioned, you have an intervention, right? You mentioned the common defense and foreign policy of Europe as defense. That's a tough one. Right now, Europe is also faced with the very, very important question, which country is actually its southern flank? Is it Turkey, as defined by NATO? With Turkey gravitating slowly towards Moscow, will that make Greece the southern flank? And what happens with the rear of Greece, meaning the Western Balkans? Those are very, very important issues, and I think we haven't given any solutions, but we did open here about 10 or 15 very vital issues. Please, Erkki.
There's no way we can conclude the discussions, and I've covered all the questions, so everybody has to choose their own poison. And mine is the question which I started with. It's what is the world order actually based on? Is it based on interests or is it based on values? And I would like to say that in today's world, given the interdependence that we have and given the global threats that we have concerning unsustainability, that there is really no difference between these interests and values. We have to have both as the basis for the world order. But I would also like to sort of challenge what Thomas Gрэм said about our problems with values, that we in Europe have different values than Russia. That is true, and I'm quite concerned about the situation and the authoritarian tendencies in Russia. But I'm also equally concerned about what are the American values today. I mean, America first, or the fondness for the death penalty, climate change denial, and this is supported today by the Republican majority in the US. So I don't say that we still have a lot of common interests with the US, but I don't think that we can say that we share the same values, except on paper. I mean, and don't overlook the value of the commitments that have been already made some 70 years ago. The UN Charter is there, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948 is there, and the final document of the Conference of European Security and Cooperation is there, and we have all signed on to that. I don't know how seriously we took it at the time, and probably if we were to introduce the Convention on Human Rights today, we would have the majority of the world states voting against it, because they have learned by now that this is not a formal document. This is something for which we are all responsible for and have to answer. So, and you also said that the international order is based on sovereignty, non-interference, and respect for human rights. But this actually doesn't go together, because there are limits to sovereignty. Nobody can on their own should be allowed to destroy our common environment, and climate change denial and so on is one part of this. But equally, for human rights, we are all responsible. And we are also responsible to answering to human rights organizations, the Council of Europe and the human rights courts for violations of these rights. So sovereignty is not absolute and it's not workable in today's world at all. And this is something where we are still living, many of us are still living in the old world of sovereign nations. But the real change is that at the end of the Second World War, we had 2.3 billion people in the world. Now we have 7.5, and we are going to have at least 10 before it evens out. So we cannot work on the same values, on the same basis as we did and manage world affairs when we had only 1 billion or so people.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this is what we're talking about, the ever-changing and more rapidly so layout in every segment of our lives, from economic, social structures to defense, to security. It needs to be adjusted every 5 years, unless I'm mistaken, or maybe even faster, because it keeps catching us by surprise. Alexander, you wanted to? I'm sorry, I don't think we'll have too much time for questions from the audience, but
if I may, just not to be very Soviet, I would like to disagree with you, Mr. Minister, so that we are not totally in agreement. I don't believe basically that Russia has absolutely other values than Europe. Russia is member of the Council of Europe. Russia is under the European Court of Human Rights. Russia has ratified the European Convention on Human Rights. And for me, major European values are formulated in the European Convention on Human Rights, which is the binding copy of the declaration, of the International Declaration. And of course we have difficulties, we have disagreements, but I wouldn't go too fast to say we have different values. I think that we have the same values, and we should stay by this. The values are probably very simple. We have disagreements, but I think that nobody today in Europe would be against the right to life, against the fact that torture is totally prohibited, against the freedom of expression, against the freedom of assembly, against the due process. I think that this is something which unites us, and we should be very strong on this, even if there are difficulties. Because if we say very quickly, okay, now we are on different sides, we have no the same values, let's talk, then we have no good basis for talking. I think that the basis is already here, so I would be more cautious on this.
So much disagreeing with me as with Mr. Graham.
This works now, right? I think you're demonstrating the point. Europe does share values, but the world doesn't share your values, even if they use the same vocabulary. And I think that's something that we need to recognize. It's not simply a matter of disagreements. They're very broad disagreements, so that you could raise the question as to whether those values are shared or not. If we take the issue of sovereignty, sovereignty is certainly shared in Europe. But Russia doesn't believe in your type of shared sovereignty. India doesn't believe in your type of shared sovereignty. China doesn't believe in your type of shared sovereignty. The United States, to some extent, but some extent not. And we have not only the challenge of European order, but we have the larger challenge of world order. And how you reconcile these differences that come out of different traditions, different ways of thinking about the world. And I think that's one of the great challenges going forward. Where are you prepared to make the compromises in order to have a more peaceful world? If you think back to the end of the 30 Years' War, that was a tremendous compromise that allowed you to end the bloodshed here and establish a type of order that provided stability more or less going forward. But when you started, the differences between the Protestants and the Catholics and so forth appeared to be so far apart that it led to 30 years of slaughter before you found a compromise. People changed in different ways. Can we do that on a world level or not? I don't know. But something will have to give in European values if you're going to be able to accommodate the others.
Yeah, I think the problem with values, of course, was the question of definition. But you can have very different values if you live separate. It's not a problem. China, for many centuries, with the exception of when Marshal He was leading some ships outside the area, they were very separated, had different values. It was not a problem. The problem is in a world where you are not so far apart, and of course what Erkki said about the environment, when you think about the common environment, and when you are more in contact, then is the question about the value. Secondly, if the values are always the same, what are the differences then? So I think there must be some different values, because otherwise we wouldn't have a dispute inside the Eurasian continent. Secondly, of course, it's not only about value, it's about how you understand politics. If it's more on power politics or more on compromising, more to find negotiations and find a compromise. Now, Mr. Trump is a good example when he moves from more or less Obama-like politics to say, let's have a compromise. For example, the Iran negotiations was a typical way of compromise, where also Russia and China, European Union, and the US did take part. What he's doing now, of course, is not uncompromised, but saying America first or me first, and I have the truth. So the real conflicts come when some countries say, I have the truth, and either you follow me or you are not on my side, which already was happening when we think about Mr. Rumsfeld. And the idea is not to have alliances where you work together and speak also with the other part, but this kind of coalition of the willing, as Rumsfeld said. You know, when I need you, I take you. If I don't need you, I don't take you. I leave you alone. And this is a shift in policies where, especially the smaller countries, who cannot say me first. I mean, Belarus can say me first, who would listen? Huh? If Trump says me first, or if Putin would say it, it is a different thing. Therefore, I think, especially from smaller countries, we have to fight against this kind of me first, because otherwise we are lost.
That's very true. It reminds me of somebody who told me in the United States, a great person. I learned a lot from her. I said, you know, sometimes I think it's not what you are saying, it really matters who interprets what you're saying. So there is something there. Everybody seems to have a good case, and everybody's saying that, yeah, we want to do this for the good of mankind and peace and stability, and yet it's not working.